Hi all, now that we've got our test database created, what we need to do is obviously add some tables of data. And the way we can do that is twofold. We can, of course, right click and create a new table using this table designer. So we'll do two tables, we'll do one this way and then we'll create a second one using SQL script. So let's have a look. Let's do this one as we'll have a sales team. So we'll have a sales team. Hang on, let's call this employee ID, and the data type will just have a int for this one, and we won't allow nulls. We'll assume that everybody working in the business, every employee, needs an ID. So we need a bit more information about them, and what we'll have is a varchar. I mean, we can leave the constraint off, or we can set the maximum. So we'll set the maximum, but we'll say this will allow nulls because let's just get some variance. Firstly, in our test database and tables. So we'll do the same thing. We'll do a varchar 50. Let's just get rid of that, and we'll have a location. So that could be an office location, for example. And finally, let's get rid of these. We'll set a column called grade. And grade, again, we can have as an int. But again, what should we do? We'll allow nulls on this as well. Now, one of these columns needs to be set as a primary key. You know, the unique identifier for the record that we create. And if we right click here, set primary key, that will put that in place. So once we've added the columns to our table and chosen what data type and any constraints in maximum size, we can right click on this tab and save. Obviously we can do a file save as well. Because all we've done now is designed it, we haven't actually created the table. So let's save this down as sales team. Click OK, and not much seems to have happened, but if we go back to tables, right click and refresh, we now have our database object of a sales team table. And if we just go through to look at columns, we can see here are the columns that we've just defined in the designer, and this one is showing it that it's a primary key. It says it here, PK. And in fact, if we go down to keys, we can see what keys we've got set up here, because we can have primary keys and foreign keys. So let's look at setting up a second table, but this time we'll just do a little bit of SQL. So what we need to do is create, but not a DB this time. We'll create a table, and that will be called, let's say, let's call it employee grade. Everything we put now, what we'll do is define each of the columns and the data that we entered. So we'll have a grade ID. We'll have that as an integer as well, not null. And we'll set this one for this table as the primary key. Let's see what else we have. So some information relevant to these grades. We'll have a salary maximum. We'll set this as we'll set it as an int again. There's lots of different data types we can choose, but let's have that. And finally, oops, put a comma there at the end of each one. What should we have? Well, let's leave it there. Okay, so if I hit F5 on this, we get commands completed successfully. Obviously we could have run execute, and again if we go back to our tables and refresh, we've now got employee grade and the columns that we set up along with the primary key. If we create another table just temporarily, just by changing the name but keeping the same details, let's just refresh these. Here we go. So we've got this table here that we've decided perhaps now we don't want. And what we can do is get rid of it in two ways. We can either right click and delete, in fact three ways. We can highlight it and just hit delete on the keyboard, or just make sure that's selected. We can drop a table, and it's called, so we can drag that out, upgrade 001. And if we highlight and press F5, we'll see that that's deleted the table now. Like I say, we can also right click and delete, and we'll get this dialog box to delete an object, in this case the table, and we can click OK. So that's how we add and delete tables in code. If you don't highlight this, by the way, and hit F5, it will try and execute every statement, but you can have, especially in testing, you can have a working script with lots of different little SQL statements that you might want to use at any one time, so you can just highlight them and hit F5. Okay, so now that we know how to create tables and delete them, we also know how to assign keys, and each of these has got a primary key. But if we look at the columns on these two tables, where are we? We can see that the primary key of grade ID on employee grade and the primary key of employee ID on sales team. But what we want to do is give each employee a grade, and the grade information is linked to then up here. So we'll give them a grade, say a numerical grade, because this is an integer, and in that way we'll then be able to look across tables later to find out some salary information. And obviously in a real application this could be, who knows, do they get an office, do they get a pension, etc. So lots of other information dependent on their grade.